My friends, what is the comfiest place on the Nintendo 64? I think many of us over the years have spent time just hanging out in a favorite location in a favorite game for hours on end. After all, the N64 and PS1 era was the sort of first opportunity humans had at really diving into an immersive three-dimensional environment which felt real, or at least felt like we could escape to a new place. I'm sure many of us growing up might have had a cramped room or a chaotic household, and sometimes you just wanted to chill in a comfy spot. So what comes to mind for you? Today, I'll be exploring some of my favorite comfy locations on the Nintendo 64, and hopefully giving you something to reminisce about, and certainly my first location I believe is one very few people have ever explored. So let's get into it and see if some of my favorite spots are yours as well.
Here we go!
So here we are in the game Pilotwings 64, a truly remarkable and wonderful game. One of the launch games for the N64 alongside Super Mario 64, although frankly it just does not get the respect that I think it deserves or the lasting legacy, because it really is a wonderful game. Now, of course, in this game you have to carry out certain objectives and go on what are called like pilot training courses to get medals and your license and all that. But for the purpose of this exploration and this comfy spot, imagine like you're playing GoldenEye or Mario Kart, you have to kind of abandon the purpose of your mission or race and just kind of explore the course. So we're in a course called Crescent Island. Now this game has 4 courses and they all have some comfy spots. If you have played this game, which is probably, a reach at this point, even though it's sold like 1 million copies, it feels like it's a pretty forgotten game. But if you have played this game, you might be familiar with this area of the Crescent Island map. It's sort of the kind of main harbor of the course, and there's one famous mission where you have to snap a picture of this beautiful whale out here, this wonderful, cute whale. Is it a blue whale or a black whale, whatever the case may be. And you also have to snap a picture of a fountain in front of this hotel up here. And there's a lot going on this side of the island. And it was kind of built that way because, it's heavily and prominently featured in one of the more well-known missions in the game. You can see kind of a huge resort, a huge fountain, some sailboats. It's all really quite wonderful. And even these hotels and resorts have like swimming pools, and if you fall into those swimming pools down below, you pass away. In the mission, you have to restart. The game also has numerous like parking lots out front of older buildings, which is pretty cool. And look, here's some tennis courts. Maybe nowadays they'd be replaced with pickleball courts, a game growing in popularity. But this sort of main central area of Crescent Island is not actually the comfy spot that I want to show you. For that, we have to go on the other side of the island. And it's one of those things where, just like in GoldenEye is a great example, where the developers built these huge maps as their first priority, exploring these 3D worlds before sort of assigning objectives and meaning to these maps. But if we go on this side of the map, we get to all sorts of these other small outbuildings and huts, just like this. Like what's going on here? We have kind of a 2-story, maybe a longhouse or a large boarding house or something, and a couple of outbuildings, a couple silos and a garage. And like, okay, that's pretty cool. That's, why is it there? It's certainly not part of any objective on any mission on this course, Crescent Island. I mean, look over here, there's even like so finely detailed little steps to get up to this building, if one so pleased. And if we carry on, we'll get to even more ornate and decorated buildings, which I just find so pleasing and really comfy to hang out in. We're coming up on one now, and it's really remarkable. It is none other than sort of a small, like, tiki village. And, has these huts, has a fire sort of roaring here, clearly a little bonfire. And, it sort of just really juxtaposes with the developed, hotel resort area on the other side of the island. It's sort of like, is this where the locals maybe live? You can imagine an island deep in, say, the South Pacific, a wonderful sort of paradise. And, here's this little settlement that the locals live in. And, what are they up to? Burning some brush, keeping their little property area tidy. You have little huts for the people, maybe a couple bigger huts for the elders or chieftains, or whatever the case may be. And this is just a wonderful little location to fly around, no doubt. And, this spot here, it is a landing spot for another one of the game's missions, but it's like you're not prominently passing through this little tiki village and stopping to note it. It's something you really have to go out of your way to explore and find. And we'll show one more very comfy location here. We can see my fuel gauge is indeed running low. But on the other side of the island from the main resort, and again, this has no objective purpose in the game, it was just built by the developers for fun. Nintendo and Paradigm simulation. And we see this wonderful sort of secondary resort area, or maybe a local area. And there's this beautiful ocean break wall here, as the first thing, with even steps coming up from the ocean, and a sailboat to create some safe harbor. And look, we have another beautiful fountain. We have some sort of building. Could this be a town hall? And if we check out this top part, it looks sort of like a clock up there. And there's lots of houses. You can imagine the sorts of residents who might be here, especially if you were playing this game for the first time in 1996. A couple of small, modest bungalows, a couple of larger buildings that might be, communal or commercial spaces. And, we can even see the smoke emanating from the chimney here, which is just so wonderful and so comfy. Even this building looks like it has that clock texture on the top peak here. And if we go over towards this church, you'll get a bell ringing noise. Just really, there's no sort of NPC characters, no Sims or anything like that. And yet, they've managed to make this feel pretty alive with the motion of the ocean and the sailboat and the chimney smoke. And I just love this spot because it really is off the trodden path. I mean, if anyone who's watching this has ever hung out here, please comment, because I have a feeling it'll be very few and far between. Pilotwings just so unappreciated, and we're in sort of a remote or lesser traveled part of an island. I'm gonna run out of fuel here, let myself fall to the ground. And who would have come here to take this all in and still be around to remember it today? But I just love to introduce that to you all. And there's the beautiful spot here on Crescent Island. My next choice for a comfy location is here in none other than the Carrington Institute in Perfect Dark. And I would say the entirety of the whole of the building, sort of this kind of hub world where you can, check in and choose to go into missions or explore a number of other things and interact with other characters. It's really sort of this, supposed to be this high modern design. Look at, we got lovely paintings on the wall. It's sort of like an office building for you as a young spy, Joanna Dark. But, there's all these little rooms and people we can talk to.
Hello, Joanna.
There's Mr. Carrington, and, just an endless amount of places to run around and to sort of just kind of find peace and relaxation. You're kind of the top dog, spy, or agent in this world. There's lots of little monitors we can read about various characters involved in the story. We can check out all the cheats that we've unlocked. And there's even more monitors downstairs that we can check out. Now, one thing, and certainly I would say it's a kind of funny thing to observe, I don't want to get too thick into the weeds of observing the, liminal art that passes through Perfect Dark. Maybe that'll be a great video for Ace and I to explore one day. But one thing that I find kind of funny in Carrington Institute is that there are no stairs to get downstairs from the upper balcony. And that might be because, the developers wanted you to get used to calling lifts in the game, which is sort of a big departure from GoldenEye, its spiritual processor. And, so this is certainly probably not OSHA approved. There's no, staircases or anything. I mean, this corner is pretty sick. What a liminal space that corner is right there. But just this whole building gives you that very grand and accomplished feeling of kind of having a very comfy and cool workplace, because that's what this is. Anytime you can pause and go into a mission where there's enemies coming from you, and it's much more intense. But just roaming around the Carrington Institute, you're kind of at peace and everything is safe and dandy. We have the hologram room where we can perform various battles, simulations. We also have the shooting range. Of course, what great gamer wouldn't love a shooting range? I mean, this is like a very, very cool thing to have in the game. And you go in here and, you just do a quick little shooting demonstration, some target shooting. Nothing like that Olympic target shooting. A lot of people forget that. It's actually an Olympic sport. Look at that, bronze. I took 4.20 seconds just by chance. Isn't that quite remarkable? We got the bronze medal there. Pretty cool. But there's even one of my favorite sort of interactable areas is downstairs. And, here's the cool CI for Carrington Institute logo. And even the reflections are just so impressive here. This door is locked, unfortunately. And that's the thing is, it becomes shocking later when this area is the stage for a mission in-game. The Defense Carrington Institute, where the Skedars invade and you have to protect and save your coworkers. The hostages, they become hostages, unfortunately. And, it really is quite jarring that this area of peace becomes sort of the setting for a very challenging moment, at least in the game's plot. Kind of reminds me, actually, of Diddy Kong Racing, and we might get into that a little bit later, and kind of the hub world there, where it's a very peaceful thing, and then it becomes a setting for a race, although that one is certainly more pleasant. I mean, look at this, kind of just the brutalist architecture of the area. That's quite fascinating, quite enchanting to see and appreciate and take in. I've never looked at this frame, I think, and it kind of gives me that feeling with no ceiling of the sky. And the sky is void, just completely blue. No sun here, although there is sun in Perfect Dark. And there you go. Now the one more room I want to get to is a little bit over here. In this hangar, this is a cool hangar. It's the ending of the mission version of the Carrington Institute. But this guy's computer has a lot of interesting data, especially with the locations of the missions in game. Now, I haven't completed the file here, so I don't have them all, but, Lucerne Tower is the global headquarters of the Datadyne Corporation, your sort of antithesis or antagonist corporation compared to the Carrington Institute. And the game is just so prescient in terms of predicting these sorts of battles and artificial intelligence arms race and these sorts of things. One mission that I love is the crash site mission, and canonically in the game, you are leaving with you're sneaking onto Air Force One in Alaska, in an Alaskan airbase, and unfortunately the aliens crash it and it lands here. And it says Victoria Island, which is an island in Canada, actually, way up in the Arctic archipelago. If you look up those coordinates on screen, 71 north, 118 west. Even so, it's a very desolate location, no settlements for dozens, if not hundreds of kilometers around, and it would be quite a place for such a crash and such an event. It would be very cold, as you see in the mission. And it's just kind of cool to take a reprieve from the game and run around and stroll around freely. not quite sandbox feel because we don't have weapons out here. We can't mess around too much. But it's certainly a departure from GoldenEye where there's really nothing like this. You can kind of queue into multiplayer and scroll around and run around, but it's not quite the same as really having this whole overworld or hub world to explore. And, the graphics on Perfect Dark, I see this come up a lot when people discussing games. Like, Perfect Dark probably is the pinnacle of the N64 in terms of graphics and development and gameplay and all that kind of stuff. And there's so many options. The game is really, really deep, beyond deep. Before the new Perfect Dark comes out, I do want to do a sort of a plot explained video because the plot's crazy. And it's just such a cool place, and that's why I definitely want to include it and talk about it in this list of comfy places to hang out on the N64. So let's start with just an absolute classic. Just the whole overworld of Diddy Kong Racing. One of the things that makes it really stand out from, say, Mario Kart 64 is that you just have this truly magical and majestic overworld. These rushing waterfalls, these frogs hopping around, and they're just so comfy to see. I feel like the frogs and Taj hanging out here, plus the waterfalls moving, give it sort of a vibe of it not being super empty. A lot of these N64 spaces, early 3D spaces, can sort of feel too empty at times. But this shot is just magical. This is just so fun and wonderful and peaceful. You feel like nothing is going to harm you. Life is good, when you're hanging out in the wonderful overworld of Diddy Kong Racing, especially under the waterfalls. I think I might have unlocked the drumstick there. I'll have to go back in the menu and see. I beat this file a long time ago, but on my EverDrive, but I had never unlocked the good old drumstick. And the way that these waterfalls also, some of them open up, and you can drive right through and continue to sort of find a little hidden shortcut. Of course, you're not really racing here, and so it's not a true shortcut in any conventional sense, except when you race Taj, of course. But still just feels like there's so much to explore. I mean, it almost feels like this map of the overworld is as big and detailed as maps of other racing games entirely, And so for the guys at Rare were really cooking in this era. There's just simply no doubt about that. They were mega cooking. They were trying to do things in games that no one had ever done before. The whole stop and swap thing is something I have to get into another time, but they were doing some crazy stuff. But I feel like this area is very underappreciated as well. We're in the Dragon Forest, subworld or lobby or whatever. We can enter these various maps. We can bump into TT. And it's just such a comfy little village here, You get sort of that entrance and exit, which is sort of a big castle door. And we get these, 5 houses, ostensibly, which are the 4 maps of the level, plus the trophy display, which opens up into actually a courtyard. But this kind of structuring, it's almost this, I guess you would call it Tudor style, in a way, very sort of old English folklore, fairy tale kind of design. And it's certainly a comfy place to hang out. We can go down this tree and check out the minigame, which is a cool thing unto itself. I remember finding the key in Boulder Canyon was such a cool thing when I figured that out with no game FAQs or whatever. But yeah, just a lovely area, and honestly, pretty much the entirety of Diddy Kong Racing is one of the more comfy, just more surreal and lovely and safe feeling places on the entire Nintendo 64 by far. I mean, who doesn't love just this vista is just one of a kind. It's just sit here and enjoy the sounds of the waterfalls all day, maybe even fall asleep to it. Now here's a relaxing spot, and those who know will know there are few things more relaxing than just going to the driving range and hitting some golf balls. You know, I cannot even begin to imagine the days of yore that I spent hitting golf balls on this driving range. And all you can do is look at these various greens. There's, you know, numerous greens spread out on the driving range. It's quite a good driving range, you know, with many, many greens to aim for. You can change the lie of your ball. You can really practice your shots and get a good check to see how far you're hitting all these different clubs. Now, of course, that'd be very useful in real life. Not quite as useful in game when, you know, you have a little meter underneath the club. It tells you how far it should hit. But that being said, you can test how to hit it from different lies and get some practice. And it's just so comfy here. And there's two things to really do here. One of them is to change the wind direction speed and see how far you can possibly hit it as Metal Mario. And I think pretty much anyone who played this game enough and went to the driving range attempted this. You know, I hit it there, not even full blast, one down, and with a great tailwind, my carry was still about 373 yards, which is pretty amazing. 386, that's a pretty good drive. There, we caught a good one there, a nice shot. Let's see how far this one goes. A perfect, nice power shot with Metal Mario, perfect tailwind. Carried about 379 and went about 387. And that's hard to beat. It's hard to get much further than that on a flat ground. Now, the other fun thing to do is there's one green with a hole in it that you can actually hole out a shot. And once again, I'm sure pretty much anyone who actually played this game to a significant level has attempted to get a hole-in-one on the practice green. And it's a fun thing to do as well, because you can just so easily adjust your, you know, shot speed, your power, your accuracy, your aiming, all that kind of stuff. You know, that was pretty close, right? Very, very close. On green, doesn't tell us exactly how far away we were, but let's put 1 meter per second or mile per hour speed, wind speed. It's unclear if it's meters per second or miles per hour. It really is. It's just a mystery forever. It could be its own, you know, Mario units. You know, we don't know exactly what units it's in. But you can't get 1M on normal gameplay mode. You can only get 3 as a minimum. But 1 and 2 you can get in this driving range, which again adds the sort of serenity and kind of sandbox feel you get just out on the driving range, hitting balls, forgetting about the world. There we go, we nailed it, hole in one. We still got that dog in us, you know? That's what you say. And yeah, just always a wonderful time hitting golf balls on the range. If you've never done it yourself, I recommend find a local driving range and hit some balls, and you'll feel better about whatever's been bothering you lately. And that's why I always love to hang out here in the driving range in Mario Golf. So what would your pick for a comfy place be in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? Well, mine would certainly be Zora's Domain. You know, just one of the most max comfy places maybe ever designed on any video game console It's just truly remarkable. And I suppose I was thinking about this in this diving game. There's really not that much stuff to do in Zora's domain. This diving game is like one of the few things to do. I mean, look how slowly the text is scrolling. It's kind of unbelievable. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, the vibe of Zora's domain is very similar to that of, like, you know, those memories we all have of being on vacation in a hotel and them having like a really weird swimming pool area with like a water slide where you were playing all day, or some kind of water park. You know, maybe you were there with a friend you just met on that vacation and never met again, or maybe you were there, you know, with a friend who you're no longer that close to. And these are very common themes in the liminal space sort of community and world. And in this weird way, you know, the diving game and sort of just the random structures of Zora's domain give me that same vibe, you know, of that sort of like water park feel. You know, you can just imagine hanging out here all day, swimming around with friends, making friends, you know, jumping off that island, diving off the waterfall. And once again, like, I've lit the torches, and in a way that gives a bit of fireplace ambiance that just makes things so comfy here, you know? Just to imagine. And really, that's like one of few things to do. Like, in this entire Zora's domain, there's a shop, there's a few Zoras to talk to, you know, there's the diving game, there's obviously part of the quest where you talk to King Zora, and like, that's really it. But yet it just feels like you can just spend so much time hanging out here. You know, it's a safe place. There's no enemies in here. It takes a bit to actually figure out how to light all the torches and get that heart piece under the waterfall. Once you do, it feels very rewarding. You know, one of the more fun heart pieces to get in this game, I would say. You can really farm Deku sticks from this jar, like going back and forth into the shop, if you ever wanted. But yeah, I mean, just the music is also very surreal and delightful, one of a kind. I always thought it'd be cool one day to have a bathroom in your house where the Zora's domain music plays. And maybe that's something that as I get older, it's not as cool of a thing to have, but hey, who knows? This fella gave me the silver scale. Now, once again, I'm playing on the practice ROM, and so I actually had the gold scale. And so I wonder if this overwrote the gold scale, and it certainly did. So that's kind of funny. But hey, not a huge deal, you know. Yeah, that arch towards Lake Hylia. You know, when you first go through it, you think, "Wow, what's this going to be?" And then it spits you out in Lake Hylia, and you go, "Wow, it's amazing! Like, what a cool game!" You know, it's unlike anything that you've ever seen before. This guy gives us a great hint, offering a fish to Lord Jabu Jabu. What a great idea, you know. And then, of course, in Zora's domain, one of the most, you know, significant mysteries is this sort of corner spot where there's a little alcove, and you wonder, like, ooh, could this be the entrance to a temple? Could this be where the Triforce is truly hidden? All of the water in Hyrule flows from Zora's fountain. I mean, that's crazy to think. All the water, all the river through Hyrule Field and Gerudo Valley and all that comes from here. Eventually reaches Lake Hylia. What a fun fact. Maybe I'll put that in an upcoming trivia question on my channel. And yeah, we dive down deep, but, you know, you cannot quite reach that alcove down there. You're thinking, oh, I'm so close to this alcove, the Triforce is in reach, and you just cannot quite make it. And certainly I spent countless hours trying to find a way to get there back in the day, and I just obviously never could. And I think one of the reasons why we come to appreciate Zora's domain so much is because as an adult it's completely frozen and it's never repairable, you know, it never goes back to normal. And so it really makes you appreciate the sort of childhood Zora's Domain version, you know? It really makes you go, like, that was something special and rare. It makes you look upon those memories fondly, you know? Now, I'm going to do something here that I've only recently learned how to do, and that is that I watched a tutorial on this, how to actually get to that opening underneath Zora's Domain. So I'll fall off here again. I watched a tutorial on this, and it's actually pretty easy to do, believe it or not. You simply hookshot the top corner. It doesn't have to be too precise. Press A, then B, very, very quickly, like a frame later, which will jump slash you here. And then there's all sorts of ways to side hop or backflip, get in the water, and then a series of exchanging your iron boots and real boots. You can swim in. I mean, wow, one iron boot looks like it got me in. And now look, we can go down here in this opening. And it's actually way bigger of an opening than the one that goes to Lake Hylia. It's so much bigger. But obviously it is not the entrance to a hidden dungeon where you would get the Triforce or a whole new game or anything like that. And so, once again, the reality of this alcove sort of reflects the reality of growing older, and Zora's Domain will never be the same. And, you know, these magical experiences you have in your youth are just, you know, you're met with sort of mundane normalcy of the world as you get older. And I think there's a lesson in that we can all learn, and that I think we all have learned through playing these games over time, you know. If only this was the secret entrance to, you know, the Sky Temple or the Light Temple or whatever it may be. But alas, my friends, it is simply not. You know, you wonder if it ever was going to be. That could be cool. And, you know, just look how much smaller that opening is here. You know, this is obviously a more finished warp opening. And maybe that alcove would have been an opening at some point, but it just isn't. So here we are in the wonderful Clock Town in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. One of the comfiest locations on the entire Nintendo 64, no doubt. But there's two locations in particular that I want to check out here, and obviously as we see Cafe put a letter in the mailbox, one of the first things you see in the game, which leads you into sort of this world of mystery, and leads you into the laundry pool, especially the first time you're playing this game. I mean, this section of the game is just so comfy. You know, you're hanging out in here wondering exactly what's going on. You know, as you explore for the first time playing the game, you kind of try to wonder, how do I get that door open? How do I talk to this fellow? You know, what exactly is going on? And it takes you forever to figure out. But just this lovely, I mean, little pool, you know, that you can kind of hang out in. You have one frog hopping around, one fairy, and you have a few people who kind of come and go here. You know, we have the, I guess, Song of Storms guy, I'll call him, shows up on one of the days, and Anju shows up, and it's just sort of this, like, weird, surreal spot where you're not in the hustle and bustle of town, and you're just kind of quietly trying to put a puzzle together of what's going on. You just enter this strange world, and you don't know exactly what's happening. And another thing that really hits me in the laundry pool, it hit me when I was a kid first playing the game, is like, you know, I'm thinking, okay, this different world, completely different to my own, does laundry. You know, there's really no evidence of people coming here and, you know, washing their clothes in, I guess, this spot here, in the river, or as the water passes through. But it's called the laundry pool, and so presumably you think, okay, they're doing laundry here. And it really, for the first time, made me realize, like, everyone in the world does laundry, you know? And that's not exactly something that you think about at a young age. But certainly when I was playing Majora's Mask for the first time in my life, that struck me. Like, everyone in the world has to do laundry. It's one of the things that unites every single person around the world, you know? Eating food and doing laundry's right up there, you know? And I just love hanging out here on all 3 days of this cycle in Majora's Mask, and certainly one of the utmost comfiest spots. You can really see why all these townsfolk come here to sit and chill and ponder about their life at various stages. Now here's another insanely comfy room. This is the mayor's house. I suppose this is Madame Aroma's office. The mayor's office is next door, and she's just chilling in here. She has these 1 couch and 1 chair, a nice teapot, and again a roaring fire. I think comfiness certainly gets highly added to when there is a roaring fire. There's no doubt about that. It makes anything more comfy. You can just imagine hanging out in here and having a good old-fashioned time, you know. One could say the mayor's office still makes good times the old-fashioned way. You know, you can just picture sort of, you know, hanging out here with friends or cousins, you know, at a cabin. It's like a room in sort of a cabin or a you know, vacation house, sitting on the floor, playing some board game and warming up by the fire, and who doesn't want that? Now if we go in here, we can see again 2 more comfy beds and a beautiful fire, and in here is another bed, and this is sort of Cafe's room, and we see obviously he mentions some stuff in his diary that's supposed to give you a hint, but I love how on his desk there's this picture of Anju there, which is, you know, very sweet. You know, if we were only so lucky, you know, what a lucky gal she is. Obviously her love Cafe truly appreciates her and doesn't take her for granted, with a nice picture on his desk. And yeah, I mean, I wonder if supposedly, you know, his parents, the mayor and Madame Aroma, sleep here, and he sleeps there behind a curtain. But hey, another comfy spot in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. There are countless comfy spots. I could go on forever, but that'll do for now. Obviously, I've got to call it somewhere, so hey, there you go. Did you find any of these locations comfy? And were any of these also some of your favorite locations? I could easily do part 2, 3, 4, and so on of this video, so let me know if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. A special thanks to the patrons for their support over on Patreon. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream, video, or fireside.